People who quit their jobs on the first day. What was your I'm outta here moment? I took a job at a lockdown residential treatment center as I was desperate for a job. The interviewer said most of the kids were court ordered and were a step away from juvie. The interview didn't go well, so I was honestly surprised when they called me offer me the job. The morning of training was going over all of the state and federal laws that govern the place, like resident rights and staff to resident ratios and the like. The afternoon was a tour of the facility where it became readily apparent that none of the laws we'd just covered were being followed. I left at the end of the day and never came back. I had a feeling something bad was going to happen at that place. A few months later they got shut down after a riot that results in several serious injuries to both residents and staff. Glad I wasn't around for that. Happened to my wife. Fresh out of college with her psych degree, she applied to be a counselor at one of these facilities. During the interview they start talking about training her to physically restrain patients. She's 5'3", 115 pounds soaking wet. As a counselor, it's crazy how sketchy those places can be. Summer job working for a landscape architect. Got to the job site and he asked me to dig a hole in some rocky dirt. I asked for a shovel. He didn't have one. I asked for a hand spade. He didn't have one. He told me to just dig the hole with my bare hands and then he drove off to another site, leaving me completely alone. I dug for a little bit and then said frick this and left. Had the job specified that I needed to supply my own tools I could have, but it didn't, and I wasn't going to work for somebody that expected folks to dig through hard, rocky soil with their hands. On the first day of working at Amazon warehouse, the managers broke down to everyone how a 15-minute break works there. Walking to the break room is 2 minutes. 10 minutes of actual break and then 2 minutes to go back to your stations. It took me 2 minutes to walk to my car and I took a forever break. Also you have 3 minutes to use a bathroom, but the nearest bathroom is a 5-minute walk away. I was 17 and working precast concrete. Refused to use a rusted to crap ladder. Supervisor called me a P. Got up about 7 rungs before his foot went through one. Heard his foot snap as he fell. I called an ambulance and walked to my car in the parking lot. This shouldn't be funny, but I laughed anyway. Answered an ad in the paper. This was the mid-90s. What seemed to be an office job, making sales calls when I was in college. Did a phone interview and was called back for an in-person interview. When I go to the interview I'm led into a room with about 50 other people and a small stage at the front of the room. We're all somewhat confused as to what is going on. Finally a guy gets on the stage and informs us that we've been selected for the opportunity to sell Cutco. Me and 2/3 RDS of the rest stood up and walked out. Anytime I see more than a dozen people for a job interview, I just nope the frick right out. If it's not door-to-door sales paid only on commission, it's some MLM. I wish some job interviews would be more forthcoming about that. Some places have outright lied to me. Not technically first day but second day. When I was 20 or so I got hired to be a temporary floor member for Forever 21 during the holiday season. My training started a week before Black Friday, so the store was already kind of in chaos. On my first day of training I walked in and the floor manager gave all the new hires a tour showing us the facility and layout of the store. After this I was assigned to a veteran floor member to shadow and get an idea of what my job was and what my duties would be. As soon as I was assigned, the manager dipped, never to be seen again. An hour and a half into my shift my shadowee got an emergency family call and had to take off for a week. When this happened I found some other floor manager and explained the situation and asked them who else I should shadow. The manager's response was just do what you can by yourself, you'll be fine. Everyone else is busy. Figured we'll okay, I'll try. I don't know if any of you have shopped in the women's section of Forever 21, but during seasonal sales they will have multiple articles of clothing that all look almost exactly the same but with slight differences. A white cardigan with 4 buttons that looked literally the same as a white cardigan with 5 buttons. The best part was these different items were often placed in completely separate parts of the store, and it was the job of the dressing room to return the unpurchased items to the correct section so the employees could put them back on the shelves. Well, These employees freaking sucked and I didn't know if they were a part of my section or not, so I'd spend a ridiculous amount of time trying to find where they go before realizing, wait, this isn't even my section. I've checked literally every rack, so I'd put it back on the sorting rack and move to the next item. More than 50% of the stuff I was told to reshelf wasn't my section. I just did as best as I could and got ready for my next miserable day. The next day I come in and the store manager pulls me to her office and tells me how slow I was the day before and if I want to keep working here I need to be very fast. I explained my lack of training and unfamiliarity with the store and she told me if I didn't know where the clothes were in sections I should come in my free time and memorize where stuff was at. I spent the rest of my shift putting clothes in random freaking places, then never came back for a third shift. Frick that place and their management. A long time ago, not long after getting my papers as a chef, I had an interview at a hotel for a position in the kitchen. The executive chef and I chatted in his office for about 20 minutes. At the time I remember him coming off as very arrogant, which is quite common in this field. I didn't think much of it at the time as the pay was decent and the shift was what I wanted. As I was leaving his office I turned to leave through the dining room, the way I had come in, which was closed at the time. It was another hour or so before service started and he says to me, no, not that way, go through the kitchen. You're not good enough to go through the dining room. I was so surprised by what he said. I just did what he asked without a word. Later on, after I had got home, I phoned him up and said that after having a close look I decided that his menu wasn't good enough and that I wouldn't be accepting his offer. I felt the sear from here. I noped out of an interview one time, thanked them at the end and said it wasn't for me. Those interviewing, management level folks, started arguing with each other in front of me during the interview. I figured, if this is the vibe at the management level then I sure as heck don't want to be your employee. I answered an ad for a babysitting job. I was already working on a casual basis but it was sporadic, so I thought some after hours babysitting would be welcome extra cash. The couple were both in the military and proceeded to tell me that I would be staying in the spare room and looking after their 6-month-old child around the clock as well as doing the housework. I would have one day off every 2 weeks. They said it is cash in hand so I could sign on to the dole, unemployment benefit, to make up the rest of the money. I left on the spot. They wanted a live-in housemaid and nanny, not a babysitter, and they were not able to pay for one. Why they thought it was up to me to illegally collect the dole to subsidize them I don't know. I've heard of situations similar to this before. Often they've had someone work for them with that arrangement previously so they think it's somehow normal or okay. You sometimes see people wanting full-time childcare and paying like $100 a week because their friend had been happy with that arrangement. It's a bit different when it's a total stranger who doesn't owe the family any favors. I got hired at a very small knockoff dollar store in an old, failing mall. The owner was foreign with a very thick accent. He told me I'd get $6 an hour but neglected to mention it was under the table. I spent about an hour stocking the very overly cluttered shelves before I was told to get more chips out of the back storage area. I walk back there and there's about a dozen men sitting on boxes all crammed into a small back room. I asked where the chips were and these guys all glared at me. They started speaking in another language and rapidly motioned towards me. Then one guy got up and asked what I needed. I told him I was supposed to get a box of chips and he got a box out of the pile and handed it to me. The entire time these guys are all staring at me. Everything back there looked shady as all heck and it was very uncomfortable. A while later I had to use the restroom, which was also in the back. These guys all just wordlessly glared at me while I went into the woman's restroom. While I was in the restroom, someone tried to open the door. I was the only woman there. The owner told me he wanted me to come back that night late in the evening, well after the mall closed. I didn't show up. I came in the next morning and lied about why I couldn't work there. He still gave me the few bucks from what little time I did work. I don't know what in the heck that guy had going on there and I didn't want to find out. I was more concerned about the door being tried. Applied for a job at my longtime favorite restaurant. Celebrated my birthday there every year. Owner asks me to come in for basically a tryout. As I communicated, I was looking at other job possibilities. I come in and they just stick me on dishwashing for an hour. No biggie. Then their dishwasher doesn't show up, so the kitchen manager asks me to stay one for their lunch rush. Sire, I'll get paid for the hours I do. Kitchen staff was nice, so I was happy to help out even though I figured I'd be taking a different job. I fill out a time card at the end of the shift and tell the manager I probably won't be back. He understands and thanks me for the help. Fast forward a couple weeks and he tells me to email the owner after I ask him if I should pick up my measly paycheck. I do. She basically tells me to frick off over text. Tells me it was staging and that she told me I won't be paid. I respond that I understand that, but that I stayed an extra 3 hours which I was told I'd be paid for. She stops responding. I decide I want to be petty over the $40, so I get the Stadwell Labor Department involved. Dude goes in there and makes her pay me for the hours including the first staging hour. Couple weeks later I got my $40. Never went back to that restaurant. You're not petty. I wonder how many other people they fleeced for free labor. I was a waitress. The only waitress at a just opened diner. The boss didn't have me sign any paperwork. Everything was under the table. But that wasn't what made me quit at the end of the night. In order to get me where he wanted me to go, he would pinch my skirt at my upper thigh, not quite the butt but very close, and pull me around like it was a leash. Needed me in the kitchen? Rather than call me, he would come out, pinch my skirt and pull to the kitchen. Needed me at the cash machine? Again, come over to wherever I was. Didn't matter if I was serving a customer, and would grab my skirt to pull me. That act in itself made some customers uncomfortable. Mind you, one couple left an almost 50% tip in the end. But I think it was more out of pity and embarrassment on my behalf. I was supposed to come in the next day, but I called that night and said the job wasn't for me. I came in a couple days later to turn in my apron and he just took a wad of cash out of his pocket and paid me then and there. God, he was creepy. I think it was a smart move to quit. I was hired to be a waitress, which has a lower hourly wage due to tips. The entire shift they had me wash dishes in the sink, but paid me waitress wages. A few months later the restaurant was investigated for a number of fraud activity. That's illegal. They can't pay you waitstaff tipped wages if you're not getting tipped. Had an orientation for an alarm company. Next day manager calls and says don't worry about going into the office and to meet at Planet Hollywood. They like to get to know the employees better over lunch. Next day I go into the office and another employee whom I had not met says you must be Scandal 929. I was like huh? They responded light skinned. Pretty boy is how the manager described me. In same conversation I found out no one else had ever been invited for a get to know you lunch. I'm out. Which is a shame as you clearly have well tuned internal alarms. You would have been a real asset there. Restaurant. Swept under my station when we were closing. Giant brown pile came out with broom from under low boy fridge. Pile began to scatter. It was hundreds of roaches. Never returned. It was a small independent insurance agency in 2006. My first day there, the owner, a true fossil, said email and fax were strictly forbidden as he only believed in communication in person, by phone, or through mail. Left for lunch and never went back. I couldn't imagine the inefficiency I'd have dealt with had I stayed. They ultimately closed their doors, so it was definitely the right decision. Can't believe they even opened in the first place. My dad was always jumping on the latest technology to get business, and that was in the 80s. I can't imagine anyone thinking they can do person to person only in 2006. Sometimes you've just got to email. I interviewed for a professional marketing assistant and got the job straight away. I was under the impression that I would be an assistant to the man I was interviewed by. When I showed up for my first day, the same waiting room I was in the previous day was full of people. I quickly learned that we were all hired, and that I would be a door-to-door salesperson selling some pretty useless crap. I spent my entire day inside a Starbucks applying for other jobs and went home. Got paid, but never went back. It was a petrol station and the manager wanted me to work for free until I had learned their computer systems to what he deemed a satisfactory extent. I agreed to do it, because I needed a job, and he brought me in at 7 AM on my first day. However, he was not present to go through the training with me, so I was just standing around kind of helping out on the forecourt but not really knowing what I should be doing. Not learning anything. After about an hour and a half without the manager showing up or anyone training me on anything, I decided that I wasn't going to continue to be taken advantage of and told the cashier to pass on the message to the manager that I had quit. I wasn't the person, but I was training a new guy at a movie theater. A customer asked for extra butter. She was nice and normal, not a mean or rude customer, the kind I would pay to handle all day long. He puts the popcorn tub down, says I'm going to the bathroom, takes off his apron and walks out the front door and never came back. Maybe he shat his pants and couldn't bear the thought of returning. It was my first day at Five Guys. It was around 10:30 PM and they told me it was time to clock out. Despite not having finished closing, I then worked until almost midnight. I did not return. Salesman for Kirby Vacuums. First sale call was to a single elderly woman who was supporting her son in hospital. They got us in the door by offering a free carpet clean as a demonstration. The supervisor training me pushed and pushed to make the sale until this old woman was in tears. Just as she was about to sign the paperwork, I asked if she actually wanted to vacuum and she said it was lovely but she couldn't afford it. I took the paperwork away from her and said not to worry. Outside I told the supervisor I quit, to which he replied I would have been fired anyway. No love lost. I hung around for half an hour playing on my phone to make sure the supervisor left because he was a real piece of work. Worked at McDonald's years ago in their assistant manager training program. Had gotten hired right out of the army. First day I met with the store manager where I'd be working and training and noted that she spent majority of the time doing entry level work and then working OT to do store manager work. She told me this was pretty common because of the type of people they'd hire. Her office was a counter and she told me she had bought a chair but corporate made her remove it. She was really nice, worked her butt off and was intelligent and told me she'd been at McDonald's for 10 years. I imagined working my butt off only to be told I couldn't have a chair and decided that night I wasn't going to work for a company like that. Young and naive right out of college, took a marketing job. My interview was great. Nothing shady seemed to be going on and no immediate red flags. After 4 hours of training, my first day consisted of going door to door in a suburban town trying to sell cable to older people. We were told to dress for business, so I'm hiking around for miles in my best skirt, suit jacket and heels. Hours were from 9:05 but we didn't get back to the business until well after 10 PM. Not to mention, the person I was shadowing was able to make a sale to an older gentleman who seemed to have memory issues. I note the frick right out of there. Sounds like my 86-year-old dad with dementia. I cannot believe how many people businesses try and prey on him to sign him up to long-term contracts for things he doesn't need. It's also very obvious that he has memory issues and gets very confused very easily. It's like a constant battle to clean chase these things up. Thanks for having morals though. Electronics store. My first day we had to attend a class where they teach people how to upsell folks. Basically walked you through ignoring what they ask you for and using their ignorance of the equipment against them. I thought that was really scuzzy. Then they went on to tell us about a commission style bonus program that basically forced employees to upsell everyone. When we took the break for lunch that first day I peaced out and went home. Never got paid for those 4 hours, but I never regretted bouncing on that. My first day working at EB Games. I was super excited to be there. The first half of my shift was basically tidy up the shelves. It was a high traffic location so the shelves always need tidying. After 5 hours of following kids around and putting things away I go on break. When I come back my manager is standing in his strangely empty store absolutely aghast, staring at a huge steaming pile of crap on the carpeted floor. Apparently a homeless person had walked in. Without saying a single word he dropped trow and emptied his bowls. My boss at me and says, "Oh good, you're back. Just in time. Clean that up. I'm going for lunch." I laughed at him and told him you can't be serious. I'm not going near that. He responds with, "It's your job. I'm taking a break. I want it gone before I get back." I told he's going to have to deal with it on his own because I don't need this job that bad. So I quit. I grabbed my coat and went home. 1 week later the district manager calls me up to apologize and offer me my job back. Plot twist. The manager actually took the crap on the floor. It's the employee initiation. They hired me to work full time. I had interviewed to work full time. I was trying to quit a horrible job, and this job was on the other end of town. I needed enough money for the bus pass, and to make up the difference and more of quitting my old job, they hired me and showed me my schedule. I showed up for my first day. Things are going good. Then my manager called me in, sat me down, and explained that they'd have to cut me down to 15 hours a week because they'd hired too many freaking people. I explained, painfully, that I had to take a bus an hour each way and wouldn't be able to pay rent or food after that. He said I could always hold out and hope people quit. I told him he could start with me, took off my apron and stormed out in tears. Jesus Christ, that sounds horrible. Hope you are doing better now. I didn't quit, but it was an interview many years ago. The position was for an admin assistant. I got to the place and it was in the back of a strip mall, kind of, just a small parking lot and a forest. I go into interview and the guy tells me it is in fact not an admin position but an alarm system cold calling position. I immediately knew he was wasting my time and his but finished it out. He told me there would be a lot of evenings just him and I working. I don't think so. He also said that he loves to reward his team for good sales and always takes them to Mexico. I walked out and told my husband, BF at the time, there was no way I was taking that. I got a call for a second interview but never picked up the phone. So sketch. A trip to Mexico with my boss would be a nerve-wracking experience for me, not a reward. I was hired at a chain restaurant to be a hostess. I was so excited because my last job was washing dishes and because of my eczema, I had to quit. It was too painful to do that job. So, I arrived at my new job dressed up to be a hostess and those mfs took me back to the kitchen to do dishes because the dishwasher just quit. I noped out of there real fast. 13 years in restaurants. I can say if you have any skin condition, stay out of restaurants, not because of your skin but the chemicals some places use for their dishwashers, i.e. seen people welt up just from industrial detergent. Gas station. The manager gave me a weird vibe. I made it through the first day but didn't go back. Found out later he cornered another girl in the back of the store and she had to fight her way out. Trust your gut. Worked in a hotel for a day. No one told me where anything was. Got chewed out for it. Guests enjoying their meals told me to pay no mind, I was doing a good job and that my boss is a C. I told the manager that I was quitting and wouldn't be doing the next shift. I arrived the next day, returning a work uniform, and my supervisor approached me and yelled at me for being late. I told her I already quit but if I was working, technically I was 5 hours early for my shift. Absolute nutcases. My first internship was at a Brazilian teen detention center. It's akin to a prison, but Brazilian law has some distinctions between crimes committed while as an adult or as a teenager. Teens go through socio-educational measures. I was walking through a courtyard with my supervisor when some doctors came running, flailing their arms and screaming, while officers came running from the opposite direction. I get pulled by my supervisor who just tells me to run back to our office. These teens as young as 12 had escaped their block. A few minutes later an officer comes knocking on the doors of the offices and yelling for everyone to run outside because a fire had broken out. Some of the teens had set mattresses on fire in their cells. I didn't really nope out. My teacher did. She hadn't even been there that day, so I was forced by the university to choose another place to intern at. Oh well. I technically quit before my first day. I got hired at a well-known gift store. I was hired with the understanding that I would work Saturdays, Sundays, and a grand total of 8 hours a week, so 2 4-hour shifts, also at minimum wage. Not a problem with me. Done that before. I would just pick up a part-time job for rest of the week. Nope. Apparently that wasn't allowed. The manager thought that was a horrible thing and disrespectful to her. I should only work for them and only them, and I should have better control over my money if I can't survive on $64 a week before taxes. Yeah, didn't show up cause frick that noise. She called me off that I wouldn't show up to such an opportunity. It was a waitress gig for a local restaurant. I finished my first day, then was told that training would continue for 6 weeks. While I was in training, all of the tips I got had to be given to my trainer. I was being paid less than $2 an hour. I called the next day and said it wasn't gonna work out. That doesn't seem legal at all. Restaurant line chef. Worked a 12-hour shift. Was given 2 breaks of about 10-15 minutes each. burned my hand numerous times because they gave me plates that came right from the oven and never said a word. End of the shift. I told the head chef I was done. He called me soft and said I was the third person to quit on him after a day. I said maybe it's the way you treat people. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.